Yes? Okay. Did you all get the Wi-Fi? Yes? Okay. Okay. So I'm Miguel. Nice to meet you. And this is my story with Flask. I 2 years ago or so, my wife forced me to start a blog, and she makes the big decisions, and I get to make the small decisions. So I decided to write my own blog instead of going with WordPress or something. So I looked at many frameworks and I ended up with Flask. And when I had the blog done, I decided to blog about Flask, and that was how the mega tutorial was born. I wrote some articles about APIs as well, because at work we were doing APIs, not with Flask, but I got interested in the topic. I wrote a few extensions, and those 5 are the ones that are the most popular. We're going to look at a couple of them today as part of this. And then finally, I was offered to write the book on Flask, which is coming out hopefully in May. So anyway, that's me. Maybe I should say this. I also have 25 years of experience as a C and C++ developer. So if you see anything non-Pythonic, ignore it. It's, it's 25 versus 4 years that I've been doing Python, so can't help it. But as you know, the big message I'm going to try to convey today is that with Flask, you can do whatever you want. The choice is yours. So if you see something that I do that you don't like, just ignore it. You can do it your own way. Okay. So hopefully you saw my message on the tutorial list, and I wonder if you guys tried to install the application. Yes, it worked. Yes. For everybody? Okay. Good. So hopefully you have a little bit of Python coding experience. So when I show you code, you understand it. You'll be able to read it. I'm not going to talk much about HTML and CSS and JavaScript, but the application uses them. So it would be good if at least you know what those are. And then all I'm going to do today works on Python 2.7 and 3.3. I developed it under 3.3, so that's the one that I tested the most, but it works fine on 2.7. I believe there are some issues running 3.4 with SQL Alchemy, which I'm using. So there might be, if you use 3.4, there might be some rough edges still. The nice thing about 3.4 is that it comes with virtual environments, native. And that's why I tried it a week or so ago, and I had some issues, but hopefully those will be resolved. Okay, so you got it installed, so I guess that's we're going to save some time here. So my idea for today is that I'm going to basically do a huge code review session. I'm going to explain this application as best as I can. You're welcome to interrupt me if you have any questions. If you don't interrupt me and don't have any questions, we're going to end early, I think. If you ask a lot of questions, I'm going to have to suppress some of the stuff at the end, and that will be okay, no problem. But yes, I would like you to ask me any questions you have. So you're not going to get to play with it a lot during the session today, but then you're going to go home, and I hope you're going to hack this application and transform it into your own project. And that's perfectly fine. The application is open source. You can do whatever you want with it. And the documentation is important. I'm not going to cover every little thing that Flask offers, so you should go read the docs, which are very, very good. And then the last two things is that I'm going to be available for questions after the tutorial. So you can ask me, and I answer questions all the time. No problem with that. And then I want to see what you build. So if you build something, let me know. So the example application that we're going to build today, so this is a list of features, but better than this, I'm going to show it to you. Hold on. Okay. Oops, technical problem. I need to run this. So, sorry. There we go. Okay. So I'm running it locally here on my Mac. So this is an application that came shortly after my proposal for this session was accepted. And after all the euphoria and the excitement, I panicked because I realized that I was going to be teaching a lot of stuff, maybe more than a human brain can assimilate in 3 hours. So I came up with the idea of writing a web application where I will show my talks, and then you can go and ask questions. And initially, I didn't think that was going to be the application that I was going to teach here, but I wrote that in a weekend, and I liked it, and it basically has all the things that that I wanted to teach in this session. So here we are. I eat my own dog food, as you can see. I'm hosting this on my website. So if this is, what you're seeing here is local, but I have this application running on talks.miguelgrinberg.com, and we are there. I have an entry for this talk, and you're welcome to post questions there, and I'll answer them. So this is kind of like a blog, but for talks. And I extended the application so that you can have multiple speakers. You can see that this middle one is for a person who also is an administrator. The speakers get their own profile page, and when you go there, you see, an avatar if there's one, or this nice geometric thing if not, and then you see a list of talks. If I go to my thing, so I do have an avatar. I have some information, my city. If I go inside a talk, you get to see slides and video. And this is the talk that I did last year at my local Python group. And I didn't have a video, so I put a cool video I found on YouTube just to show how the video looks. But these are optional, so if I only have talks, I can put the slides. If I want the video. And then at the bottom, you can enter comments. And that will be where you will enter your comments. So I can log into this with my account. And now you see I get more options. I can add a talk, I can moderate comments, and we're gonna go over that in a little bit. So basically, this is the application that we're building today. It has a little bit of everything. I hope it'll be a good model for all the projects that you may have. And as I said, you can find it on http://talks.miguelgrinberg.com. That's the real one. So I have it on GitHub, as you all know, because you installed it. There are 24 versions. Towards the end, I'm going to start skipping versions and describing them, because if not, I will get too repetitive. At the start, I'm probably going to go slower, depending on, you know, and if there are no questions, I guess I can speed it up, but it'll probably go slower. Something that it's important is that what you have now is version 0.24. That's what you're running. What I'm going to be running here are all the incremental versions, so that I can show you how the application, you know, grows. You can do that too if you want when you study this application, and for that you need to check out the tags. All the versions are tagged in GitHub, so you can do v 0.1 if you want the first version. So you say git checkout and then the version that you want. Another thing that's very important is if you go to GitHub, you can click on any of the commits, and that will show you the differences from the previous commit. And if you're trying to learn how something's done, that's very useful because it shows it graphically. You can see just the changes that go into a feature, and you will be able to see the things that I'm not going to talk a lot about, like the HTML side and the JavaScript side, if you are interested in that. So once again, there were no problems installing this application. Can I skip going over the instructions? Yes. Everybody says yes. Okay. Good. We're saving time here. Maybe one thing I'm going to say, when I did this talk a couple weeks ago for my local Python group, some people got confused with the Gmail credentials versus your own credentials. And I just wanted to make sure that when I ask you to enter your Gmail username and password, that's only so that the application can send emails. That's setting up the email server. That's all there is. When you log into the application, you're using a local login that has nothing to do with Gmail. Was that clear? Okay. So before we go into version 0.1, I'm going to give you a very quick 5-minute introduction. So when you install Flask, you do it on a virtual environment. That's the easiest. And you just say pip install Flask. Hopefully you'll know this. So a Flask application has three important parts. First, you create an application instance. That's right there. It's an object of class Flask. The most important part is where you define your routes, and this is where you tell the framework what the handlers for your URLs are going to be. This basically sets up a map between URLs and your functions, so that Flask knows what functions to call when the client requests a given URL. In this case, I have two. The second one has a dynamic component, which is that name between angle brackets. And that means that Flask will match anything the client types in that space, and then it will give it to me as an argument to my function so that I can use it. The third part is that you start the server, and this is what you do when you are developing. You start the development server, and that basically starts everything. What a lot of people don't realize is that this is all you need to write a web application. You just need to respond to requests, and that is all there is. If you look at, say, Facebook, Twitter, all they do is they answer requests. And it's not the only way to write a web application, but it's the way 90% of the websites out there do it. You can get long ways just by doing this. You just write routes and then reply to them. Then you have a client-side application that knows what to do and what requests to make. And then on the server, the routes trigger whatever you need to do, talk to a database or whatever else that's application specific. And That's it. That's all there is. So when you write a little script like this one, all you do to run it is just run it. That's it. It's a normal Python script. You run it, and that starts the server, and off you go. So a very big thing with Flask are decorators. Flask will not be the same without decorators. And we've seen the route decorator. That's the app.route prefix to functions that you've just seen. But there are a few more. And we're going to look at, I think, all of these that I have here today. But I have them listed here as sort of a reference if you need to come back to this. Many Flask extensions also define decorators, and we're going to see some of those today as well. So decorators are really, they make Flask code very, very easy to read. So they're very useful. Another big thing that a lot of people don't understand with Flask are the context globals. Many times when you get a request, and so Flask runs your function, you need to get information about that request. And the obvious way would have been for Flask to send you the request data as arguments to your function. But then all your functions will have a long argument list. It will be painful and ugly to see. So the way they decided to do this is to use these things that look like global variables, but they're really not. They're sort of magical global variables. And they're magical because if you have multiple threads in your web server, these variables have different values on each thread. Other than that, they behave like global variables. And there are 4 of them defined by Flask, and others defined by extensions. But the 4 that Flask defines are current app, which gives you your Flask application instance, so you don't have to pass it around, all over the place. You just say from Flask import current app, and that's your app. Also, if you have multiple apps running, which is not usual, but you can do if you want, then anytime you ask, you'll get the one that's context specific for the request that you are processing. G is a global dictionary of data that you can use, and we're going to see an example of how this is used later. You can use it during the life of a request, and then it goes away, and then when the next request comes, you get a new one, a brand new one. And you can use it to pass variables between different components. Request is the request object. That's where you can see what the client wants. And then session, that's the user session. The user session is like G, but permanent. So anything you write to the user session survives the request, and when you get the next request from the same client, you find that data, and that's how you write, for example, the logged in status of a user. You put it there, and then when they go about the website, you remember that they are logged in. Okay. And then the third important part is that the helper functions, Flask comes with a few. These are not all of them, but these are the ones that we're going to use today. And I'm going to talk about them in detail, when the time comes. So they're here just for reference. As I said before, I'm not making an effort to cover every little feature Flask has. So you should go read the documentation, which is very good. Something that I started doing lately is, instead of going to the documentation directly, I go to the source code of Flask, where the documentation is, and then the source code is very, very readable. So many times, you can see the documentation and the source code together, and that is, the most useful, at least for me at this stage. So, don't be afraid of looking at the source code, because it's very, very easy. I believe when I counted, there were 2,100 lines of code, which is tiny for a project. I believe Django is north of 50,000 lines, just to give you a comparison point. So this is 2100. Okay. So we are going to start with version 1.1. So in this version, I started the project structure. What I showed you before was a single script. That's great for quick and dirty tests, but it's not a scalable thing. Very soon, if you add a database, and it will get out of hand. It will get really, really big, and it's not a good way to structure an application. So the structure that I'm going to use, it's at least at the high level, is right here. I have my main directory called talks. In your case, it will be called Flask-PyCon 2014. That's the GitHub name of this project. But then inside, there are two main packages. So there's the application, which I call app. Some people like to call it, with the application name. I prefer to call it app, because then when I move code from for this to my next project, everything works. I don't have to go fix names. So I just call it app. My root directory, it's called with the project name anyway. But you as I said before, Flask doesn't care, so just do whatever you want there. There's a package for tests where I have my unit tests. We're going to talk about unit tests near the end of the talk if we have time. But if not, they're there and you can run them. I'll show you how to run them in a moment. Then the virtual environment is there. If you don't want it in your project folder, you can put it elsewhere. If you want to use that make virtual wrapper script that wraps virtual environments, fine, makes no difference. And then a configuration script and my start script, which I call manage, like Django. So let's look at these in detail. This is the application package. So inside I have a folder for templates, a folder for static files. That's where I'm going to put my CSS, JavaScript files. The templates folder has subfolders, and I'm going to go into this in a moment. We're going to use blueprints for this application. The thing with blueprints is that you can have name collisions. You can have two blueprints both having the same route name. So to make sure that there are no collisions, I make a subfolder inside templates for each blueprint. And don't desperate, I'm going to talk about blueprints in the next slide, so that's coming. There is a talks package. That's where I have my first blueprint. And then in this case, I put a models.py where I'm going to have my database models. Anything that is application-wide, like models, will go in this folder at the top level of this application package. So far, I only have models. The application package constructor init.py will have the code that initializes the application, as you're going to see in a moment also. So let's start with the configuration. Really, Flask does not have a lot of configuration requirements. It's actually very simple. All it needs to run is a set of key value pairs. That's all Flask cares about. The thing is, if you're building a decent application, you're going to have at least 3 modes in which you're going to run the application, which are development, testing, and production. And your configuration is different, or will be different. At the very least, you should definitely use different databases for the 3 modes. You do not want to mix databases. So what I do, there are a few options. Flask offers a few options to do this. The way I decided to go about this is to have a main class that I called config, and there I put all my global configuration variables, the ones that apply to all the configurations. And then I create 3 subclasses: development config, testing config, and production config. And under each of those, I put the things that are specific to each configuration. Okay? In this case, Development configuration sets debug to true. I want to run in debug mode. And then I have a secret key that I override from the base configuration. In the base configuration, I want my secret key to be obtained from the environment. For development, I don't want to have a secret key. You know, I don't want to have to go set the environment. I don't care. So if I don't have one in the environment, I just go with one hard-coded. I will never do that on a production version, but for development, it's okay. I didn't explain what secret key is. This is one of the Flask configuration variables where it is used for encryption of all sorts. So Flask and many extensions use the secret key to do encryption. And we're going to see examples of that later. The testing configuration has a testing setting. I'm just setting it to true. And then later I can check in the code if I'm in testing mode by looking at that. And then finally for production, I've got nothing so far. So that's empty. At the bottom, I have a little dictionary that basically puts all my configurations in a structure that I can use. So I give them a name to each of them, and I name the development config as the default. So that one will be the one that I'm going to use if I don't say which one to use. Okay, this is the application package constructor. The single file example that I showed at the beginning created an application as a global variable, right? It was created at the very top of the script, and then that enabled you to say app.route later to use that decorator. That is very convenient, but has some problems. The problem with having the application as a global variable is that, or the main problem, there are a few. The main problem is that by the time you gain control of your Python script, the application has been created and configured because, you know, it's a global variable, so Python runs that code, you know, as it parses the file, and then you get to your main function, and you know, right there, if you need to configure anything or change the application in any way, it's already too late, so you can't do it. So a more useful way to create an application is to write a function that makes one. And then this is called an application factory function. And then you can call it on your own terms to create an application, configure it the way you want. In this example, I take the configuration name as an argument. And you know, this function returns to the application, and then you go about things normal with this application. But of course, there's a problem. If I don't create the application as a global variable, I've lost my app.route. That's not there because there's no app. So I cannot define my routes that way, right? So that's where blueprints help. So instead of making a global app variable, I'm going to make a global blueprint. And then I put my routes in a blueprint. When I did this talk, you know, for the practice session, a lot of people had issues with blueprints. They didn't understand them. It took me a while to understand them too, to be honest. But they are really simple. I think people get confused because the name is cool sounding. It sounds like it's doing something, you know, very cool, but it's really a simple concept. A blueprint is where you park your routes. So you put them there, they do nothing, they're inactive. When you go register the blueprint with the app, all those routes get moved into the app. That's it. Well, okay, that's how I use blueprints. Let's be honest. Another two things that you can have in blueprints are a template directory, a different template directory than the app template directory, and a different static folder if you want. I don't do that. I find it better to have all, you know, templates and static files in the same place. But yes.
Where's this blueprint reference defined?
Blueprint reference. The blueprint is a Flask symbol. So you say it's the top line there. From Flask import blueprint. Is that the question?
Well, no, I was just looking
My source files or Flask's source files?
The source files of your example.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I should have mentioned this. So did you see that gray, the dark gray file name in the corner? So for all the examples that I'm going to show today, I'm not sure. I hope it's readable. So that shows the.
Is it possible to turn off, to lower some of the lighting? It's really hard to read. That's better. Thank you.
Yes. Is it visible now? So that's app/docs/init.py. So yes, all the examples, and unless I made a mistake, and I had a few mistakes on the file names because this gets repetitive and you sort of get blind after some number of examples. But yes, my intention was to show all the files for all the examples. So yes.
Blueprint is built into Flask.
Yes, it's a
separate library.
no. It's a native feature of Flask. You can write a blueprint. Question? You can write a blueprint in the same way you write an application. You can put it all in a single script, and that will be fine. But you run into the same problems. Once the blueprint reaches certain size, it gets kind of a pain to work with long files. So I'm not doing that. I'm putting the blueprint in a package. This one is called app/docs. This is my main blueprint. I create the blueprint in the package constructor, and then I import the routes from a different file. And if it gets even bigger, there's no problem, and you can split your routes in multiple files. If you have web forms, as we're going to see later, those can go in separate files. It's really up to you how you structure this.
Why did you say you didn't want to do the routes in the factory function?
No, I didn't say that. So when you have a single file script, so you have all your application in a single script, typically what you do is at the very top you declare the application instance. That's the instance of class Flask. That's what we call app. And that's a global variable, right? So if it's a global variable, then you can easily go and define your routes saying app.route. That's your decorator for routes, okay? That has the problem that with the application being a global variable, it makes it harder to configure and change at runtime because you don't get a chance to do it.
So you moved it into a factory.
Correct.
You said that you didn't want to use you didn't want to have your routes inside the factory.
I didn't say that. So
Okay, so
I could have. It will be. So this is now it's a function, right? You are inside a function, the factory function. You could put your routes there and it will work just fine, but it will be an awfully long function if you have a lot of routes. So instead, what you do in the factory function is register the blueprint, and that brings all your routes from the blueprint. Does that answer the question? So in this example that I'm showing here, the bottom code section shows those two routes that I defined in the single file example, but now they are part of the blueprint. And note that the decorator now is blueprint name.route, not app.route. So I'm using my blueprint. Yes?
So the last line in init.py, we're importing routes, but then never calling routes there?
Yes. Glad that you asked. So the problem is if you don't import them, Flask doesn't see them, right? So this is all code that runs in the global scope, right? It's all global. So by the mere fact of Python parsing it, the decorators do the thing, and they register the routes with the blueprint. So you have to import them. And I'm going to talk about why the import is at the bottom in a slide or two, because there's a reason for that too. Okay. In the single file example, I showed, I don't know if you remember, but the two routes that I defined returned the HTML of the response. They would say return hello world. That's really a bad way to write applications. And for anything that is not a hello world type of thing, you're going to have to write a long HTML document with many places where there's going to be dynamic components. It could get really nasty to do that in code. So what you do is you move the output, the HTML output to a template. And Flask uses Jinja 2 as a template engine. Jinja 2 allows you to put placeholders in the template where you have the dynamic components. And if you look at these two examples, the first one was one that had no dynamic components, so I just write the HTML there and it's done. The second one is on that second route that took an argument, and I'm sending that. If you look at the bottom here, when I call render template, I'm sending that argument to the template, and then Jinja 2 will take that name and replace my placeholder. These two templates are for routes in the first blueprint that we've made. That's called talks. So I put them in templates/talks. We're going to look at a few other things that Jinja 2 can do. Jinja 2 is probably the best template engine for Python. It's very powerful, and it also has great documentation. So it's very useful to to familiarize yourself with all the options that you have. This is the launch script. So to launch the application, I could have done the same thing I've done in my single file script, but I improved things a little bit. So one of the things that it's kind of annoying when you need to write your when you need to start your web server is that the options that you want for your web server are passed as arguments to app.run, which is how you run it. And so if you want to change options, you have to go edit the code. So there's an extension for Flask called Flask script that gives Flask a command line parser. And by default, you get a couple of commands that have all those options as command line arguments. So just by defining, by including Flask script in your application, you get these two default commands that we're going to see. Actually, the main one, run server, it's at the bottom right there. So you say manage.py run server, and that will run your application. I believe I don't have the list, but run server has several arguments that you can add. So you can say which host, which IP address you want to listen on, which by default will be localhost. So if you run it like this, like I have it here, you will only be able to access it from the same machine. If you want the application to listen on the global Ethernet on your computer, then you need to say --host 0.0.0.0. So yes.
So if you do run server from the command line, that'll override the arguments that you have in your app?
Well, if you look at this, I'm not calling app.run anymore. I'm calling manager.run now. And that one takes no arguments. So all the arguments now come only from the command line. Other things you can change with run server, you can pass a different port number. By default, it will be port 5000, but you can put it on. You can even put it on port 80 if you want, and then it'll be the default port if you have root access. The second command that Flask scripts gives you is the shell command to start a shell in the context of your app, and sometimes that's useful too. It'll start a Python console and you'll be in the context of your app. You will be able to run, current app will be set, for example, and you will be able to get to your things easier. So as I mentioned before, I have imports at the bottom, which to many it sounds weird. So one problem when you split Flask applications in multiple modules and packages is that sooner or later you're going to run into circular dependencies. And putting the import of the routes at the bottom is one way to avoid them. The problem here is that be it the app or a blueprint, you have a package constructor that defines the blueprint. Say that this is a blueprint. So you have the blueprint defined in a package constructor, and then routes in a different module needs to import the package, the blueprint. But so basically both need to import each other. If you put the routes at the top in your package constructor, then it's going to fail because both need each other and they never get time to see each other, to get Python to parse all of them. So by putting the routes at the bottom in the package constructor, you basically give a little bit of, you are giving precedence to the package constructor. That runs first. After it creates the blueprint, only then imports the routes. And the circular dependency remains, but at least now the blueprint is defined, so the routes can see it. Does that make sense? I'll take that as a, I don't know. Okay. Another trick, so that helps sometimes, not always. Another trick to avoid circular dependencies is to take one of the sides and define it inside a function instead of in the global scope. And if you remember, let me back up to this. So this is where I define where I register my blueprint. So if you see the import for my blueprint is inside the application factory. If I put it outside, that will give me trouble. So in that case, it's a local thing. I only need it inside the function to register the blueprint, so I put it inside, and that saves me from trouble.
Why would that have been a problem in this case? Because the blueprint doesn't know about the app.
The blueprint may need to import something from your app package, from up above the blueprint. So maybe not with an application this simple, but when you start having database models and stuff, it gets complicated, and the errors, when you get an error, a circular dependency error, it's really obscure. It's really, you look at it and you look at it again, and then you said, this must be circular dependency. It's not really that clear. So all you can do to avoid them is, okay. So that's the app at this point. So that's the route that took no arguments. I'm just running it locally here. If I say user Dave, that's the other route. Okay? That's all we're doing so far. By the way, you're not going to see me update the version of the app. My slides are magical, and they do that for me, so don't get bothered by that. It's actually a Flask application doing it, if you care, and if there's time and you want to know about it, I'm happy to tell you. But yeah, the slides are served by this magical Flask thing that updates my project. Okay. We ready to go on? No more questions about file structure, project structure? So we're going to start with the application looking decent. And for that, we are going to use Twitter Bootstrap. Yes. Yes, actually, if you go to talks.miguelgrinberg.com, they're there. So they're really hosted on SpeakerDeck, but you can find them if you enter this talk. So yes, if you prefer to follow along on your own laptop, feel free. They're identical, yes. So Bootstrap is a client-side framework from Twitter, open source. It makes you look like you know HTML and CSS while you don't. That will be in one sentence. And I like that because I don't know much. So basically what they do is that they went through the effort of finding a set of CSS classes and JavaScript and HTML that works okay in all major browsers. So you don't have to worry about making things look good and on all the browsers. So this is a client-side framework, so it has nothing to do with Flask. You could go about this by just putting it in your templates, and Flask doesn't need to know about this. But there's an extension for Flask called Flask Bootstrap that is very useful. It makes it a lot easier. And you don't even need to know how to install Bootstrap. Not only you don't need to know HTML and CSS, but don't even need to know how to install it. So extensions are installed with pip, most of them. So pip install Flask Bootstrap will be what you need to do, and then you import the main class from the extension. And by the way, I forgot to mention this. All extensions live in a common namespace. So all extensions are in flask.ext.extension name. So you import the Bootstrap class from there, and then you create an instance of it as a global variable. That's pretty standard for extensions. You're going to see, a lot of them. They're going to be created in that place in the package constructor. When you instantiate your app in your application factory, you have to connect the extension with the app, and you do that by calling init app on the extension, and you pass the application. That's also pretty standard. All extensions do it that way. And that's basically what brings all the features of the extension into your application. So how does this work? You don't have to worry about your main HTML document. Flask Bootstrap comes with a base document that has all the Bootstrap CSS and JS files included. And it takes advantage of a feature of Ginger 2 templates that's called template inheritance. So if you're familiar with class inheritance in code, this is exactly the same. You can have a base template, and then you can have a derived template that inherits from the base template. So the base template comes from the extension, and this thing that you see here, this is the derived template. I define it as a derived template by using the extends directive at the very top. So I say this extends from bootstrap base.html. That is the Flask Bootstrap base template. And when you work with a, yes?
Does this let you choose where Bootstrap is served from, or which version? So if you've customized
By default, they will go with the version that this extension was tested with, which at this time is 3.1 something of Bootstrap. And by default also, it will be served off of a CDN. So you do not need to host the Bootstrap files yourself. There are configuration options for Flask Bootstrap if you want to serve the files from your own static folder that I'm not using for this application, but they're available.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so when you have a derived template, you don't just write the HTML code standalone. You have to say which parts of the base template you want to override or define. And you do that by defining blocks. So blocks are like, if we could continue with the class inheritance analogy, methods. So in templates, that will be blocks. And you can have blocks that override blocks in the base template, or blocks that enhance the base template definition of that block. So we have a block for the title. The list of blocks are defined in the Flask Bootstrap documentation. So there's one that's called title. So inside it, you put the title, and that gets in the title of the page. There's one for the navigation bar, nav bar. I'm not showing the HTML code because it will not fit in this page. Basically, what I did is I went to the Bootstrap documentation and I copy-pasted their navigation bar and then changed a few things, to match. And you're going to see that for Bootstrap, it's very easy to use. And you just copy-paste examples from their documentation. It's very good about that. The main content of the page goes in a block named content. And that's where, whatever you do in your application goes. And in this case, I'm defining a div of class container that is one of the Twitter Bootstrap classes. The container class makes it basically puts your page in the middle and makes it non-scalable. That's one of the options you have with Bootstrap. And then inside it, I have my hello world again. Now, I'm going to go back. So that was before. I'm going to refresh. That is now. Okay? So it looks a lot better. But there's a problem. Let's go visit Dave. And Dave is still ugly, right? I fixed only one template. So if I wanted to do it, the obvious way would be to repeat this for the other template. But the code that's inside the nav bar, it's kind of long. It's like 20 lines or so, maybe more. I don't want to repeat myself, which brings us to version 3, where we're going to set up our own template inheritance within the application. So in the same way, Flask Bootstrap defined a base template with all the Bootstrap stuff inside. We can also define, and you can have a chain of base template and then a bunch of derived templates underneath. So we need our own base template that inherits from Flask Bootstrap's base template. And I'm going to call it base. I'm not going to put it inside the talks folder, the templates/talk. I'm going to put it in templates because this is a global layout kind of a thing. It will apply to all the pages from all the blueprints that I'm going to have. So I put it at the base level of my template folder. So this is exactly like I've done it before. I have a default title. My navigation bar is there. And then in content, I have the container div, but instead of putting my, my hello world, I define my own block. And it would have been nice if I could have used content as a name, but content is taken, so I called it page content. And that's an empty block, okay? And this is a template that is, so far it's not being referenced. It's just a base HTML file. Now, here are my two templates and how they are changed now that I have a base template within my app. So the two templates both extend base.html. Note that I dropped the bootstrap slash because this is my base.html, the one that it's in my template folder. So it's local to my template folder. I don't have to give it any folders. And then I define one block with page content, And inside it, I put my H1, my header. And on the bottom one, I have my placeholder, as I had it before. So now, Dave looks the same as, my main page. And this is how I get, the consistent look on my application. Okay? Any questions about this? Yes?
Why do you have for user.html that it's wrapped inside a div?
Page header. That one?
Yeah.
So yeah, I should have mentioned that. So that's another class that you get from Bootstrap. So if you're not familiar with Bootstrap, you can go to getbootstrap.com, and basically they have the documentation is just a gallery of all the things that you can do. So one of them is it's called a page header, and if you look at this, so you see that gray line, below "Hello Dave." That's the page header. The page header, basically, you put your content and then it puts a line at the bottom. That's one of the styles that you have. I chose this for this page versus just an H1 on the main page. They're different styles. That's all there is. No particular reason. Or actually, the reason is that I'm going to use the page header later. It's going to be more useful when we get to. So this page is what we will build our profile page here. This is going to be the user profile page eventually, and the page header looks better for this page. Okay. So this is a pretty short improvement. The version 3 has no links. The navigation bar is a fake. So you click and it does nothing. I didn't put any links. I wanted to have this separate because this is very important. You will be inclined to just hard code the links. You're defining your routes in your application, so you know what they are. I know that it is /user/username. So it's very easy to just go in the HTML and hard code your routes, but that's bad, or it's non-optimal. As you develop your application, you may find that you need to change things, and you may need to change your routes, and then your links will be broken, and you will not find out until a user tries them. So a better way to write links in a Flask application is to use the same database that Flask uses to dispatch requests and call your functions. So all those, blueprint.route calls that you make to define your routes, all that goes into a database, not a file database. It's a memory database that Flask keeps. So Flask knows, what URLs are mapped to what functions. So you can use all that data to build links, and that is done with a function called URL4. So the first argument that you pass to URL4 is the endpoint name, which is the function name. So in our case, it will be index, or for the other one, it will be user. And then that returns a link. So you can embed that directly in the template, as you can see the 3 examples in that snippet. And you don't have to worry about it. Note that the user one takes the argument. That one does not resolve on its own. It needs the username argument, which you pass as a second argument.
So was username one of the parameters you defined in your blueprint?
In the route. This is the route argument. That was written with angle brackets. Yes.
But that route is stored in the blueprint.
That route is in the blueprint. There are no routes in the application. So you need to decide if you're going to use blueprints or not. If you do use blueprints, typically you're not going to have any routes at the application level. You're going to have everything in blueprints. It becomes a lot easier to organize that way. So when you do use blueprints, as I said before, you can have name collisions. You can have, in this example, we have index and user. You can have another blueprint that defines index or user as well. And the way to make them unique is to prefix them with the blueprint name. And that's why I say talks.index or talks.user. There's a shortcut. So if you're generating a link that's within the same blueprint that you are, so let's say you are responding to index, so you are rendering a template for index. If you need to put a link to some other route in that blueprint, you can omit the blueprint name. You can say dot and then dot user. Typically, when you're putting links in a template, you don't know which route or which blueprint is serving that request. So in templates, normally you write the blueprint name. You have to be specific. But sometimes you can avoid having using the blueprint name. URL4, we're not doing this yet, but it's also used for finding static files. So again, it will be too easy to just reference /static/your file, but URL4 does it for you. And then if you ever need to change your static folder, if you use URL4, then your files will follow you. You don't have to discover broken links. So you should use URL4 for everything. And actually, so I didn't show this, but now we have home. So these are the links now, okay? And for the profile, as you saw, I hard-coded my username so far. We're going to improve that. I'm not that important, so eventually it'll be you. Okay. So database. So Flask doesn't care about what database you use, and that's one of the great things. As I said many times already, you can use your preferred database. So if you're into NoSQL databases, no problem. I'm old, and I've been trained with relational databases, and I like them. So for this example, I decided to go with a SQL database, and I'm using SQL Alchemy. Which is, if you're using SQL, relational databases, I think SQL Alchemy is, it's fantastic. So that's what I'm using. There's an extension for Flask called Flask SQL Alchemy. And you're going to find that this is a normal theme. There's something, and then someone built a Flask dash something that integrates, that thing better with Flask. And by integrate, it means that you can configure that thing using Flask configuration. And that's specifically how one of the ways Flask SQL Alchemy helps here. Instead of going through whatever method of configuration that other thing has. So I always look for a Flask extension, and in general they're pretty lightweight, and basically they don't prevent you from using the end thing that you want to use, in this case SQL Alchemy. So documentation links there. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. So hopefully you know what a database is. To configure a database using Flask SQL Alchemy, you have to give it a URL for your database. So we need to go back to our config.py and put it there. And as you can see here, I have 3 databases. Not only that, I think, that would be 6, actually. So in all cases, in all 3 configurations, I prefer to get the URL from the environment. This is another theme that you're going to see a lot in my example application. anything that could be configurable, I prefer to put it in an environment variable so that I don't have to touch the code to change it. So in this case, I prefer to read it from the environment, but if it's not defined in the environment, then I have a backup plan. I go with a SQLite database. SQLite is a tiny database engine that writes normal files, so it doesn't require a server. So it runs pretty much anywhere you get it. It's native with Python. You don't have to install any database drivers or anything. So it's very convenient for development. Not so for production because it has some limitations. So I would not recommend that you use SQLite for production. The way I build the URL might be a little bit confusing. So that will be the SQLite URL. People get bothered by the 3 slashes. I bet you are too. It's kind of confusing, but if you need to write a URL that points to a file on disk, and that's what SQLite needs for configuration, you need to put the 2 slashes that are part of the, that separate the protocol from the rest, and then in a full-blown URL, you get the user at host portion, which does not exist for SQLite. So that's empty, and then there goes another slash, that's slash number 3. And then you need to put the full path name of your database. And that, you don't see it here, but that will bring another slash. So if you look at the URL, it's going to be 4 slashes. And that's correct. It's not a mistake. Note that the files that I use on the 3 SQLite databases are different. As I said before, never mix, never use the same database on different configurations. Yes?
Are those environment variables, those are stored in your virtual environment?
No, I'm sorry, no. The environment variables are from Bash. So if you're using Bash or even Windows also has environment variables. So this, you will say in your Bash script, you say export. Then you would say, for example, for the first one, you would say dev underscore database underscore URL and equals, and then you will put your URL there, and then this will find it. When you are in production mode, when you deploy this to a web server, and I'm going to show that near the end, I'm going to provide a shortcut so that you don't have to go, define the things, all the variables by hand. But yes, it's the shell environment. Okay. The way you create or instantiate the extension is as we did before with Flask Bootstrap. So this one, you make a SQL Alchemy object that I'm going to call DB. That's a global object. But at that stage, it's an uninitialized object. And then I initialize it inside my application factory by passing my application, as we did before. Okay? So relational databases, you define models. And the models are the data elements of your application. So we're going to start hopefully up to the break, if we make it. We're going to build the user registration part, and then the second part we're going to go on the specific features of this application. So we're going to start building a user model. You need to store your users. For this application, the users are the speakers. So remember that this is an application where speakers present their talks. So the users are the speakers. The people who go view the site and read about all these talks are anonymous users. We are not tracking those users in the database. Okay? So I'm going to call those anonymous users, for lack of a better name. So if you go to talks.miguelgrinberg.com and you know and use the site, you will be an anonymous user to me. Okay, in the version of this application that you installed, you are you are a registered user, and you're probably also an admin because you register yourself as an administrator. Models. Basically, you define them thanks to SQL Alchemy as a class, a Python class. The first thing I put there is the table name. So this is a hint to the database how I want my table to be named. It is optional. If you don't put it there, then a name will be made for you. I prefer to know what name the tables are, because if I need to go look at the database, I want to find names that I know. So I defined it. The default is non-intuitive. It will take the class name and then lowercase it. So it will be user in singular. And typically for relational databases, your tables are named in plural. So I just put the name. The first data element is the ID. That's the primary key. In relational databases, all records that go in the database have a unique primary key. So that line will probably go into all your models. It's going to be in all the models that we're going to build here. And then I defined my data items. I have email and username for that person, a Boolean to know if this user is an admin or not. And I have the password hash, and then profile stuff. So this is stuff that the users can fill out, about themselves: name, location, and biography. Date of registration, member since, and then the avatar hash, which I'm going to explain in a little bit. The arguments that you see in some of them, so the first argument to db.column is the type. That's pretty straightforward. But then there are some optional arguments. Primary key will make ID the primary key that's required. There should be one primary key in all tables. The ones that I have on email and username will make nullable false will say to the database that this field cannot take empty, so it needs to be there. So if it's empty, the database will not accept it. That they're unique and they're indexed. So I don't want duplicates, no duplicate emails or no duplicate usernames. And then the index will create an index, and that makes searches fast. So those are all options that I decided on my own, right? For your project, you will find the options that are appropriate. Member since is interesting because it's got a default. So if you give a default to a column, that will be, you give it a function, and then SQL Alchemy will call that function every time you create an object. So by giving it UTC now, I get the current time and date in UTC assigned to my object at the time I create it. So this is a field that I never need to worry about. It's set by itself. So I'm never going to touch that field. That is done. I'm just going to show it. Any questions about models? So far, we created an object, a class, actually. So we still don't have a database. To make a database, you need to call db create all. db is the SQL Alchemy object that we created in the application factory. So if you call create all, SQL Alchemy will go look at all your model classes and then convert them into database statements, and then we'll invoke database, the commands in the database that create the tables. And then drop all will do the reverse. It will delete, it will empty the database. It will delete all the tables. So I decided not to use a migration framework in this class because I think it will take too much time. But you should definitely use a migration framework if you have a medium to large size application. Because as you make progress with your application, you will find that you need to modify your models, and DB create all does not modify your models. If they're created, the only way to update them is to delete, so it's called drop all, and then create all again, and you lose your data. So it's inconvenient. And a migration framework, what it does is it keeps track of all the changes and then finds database commands that upgrade a database live without destroying the data.
Which one do you recommend?
The one that I wrote, Flask Migrate, which is actually, it's a small extension wrapper to Alembic. And Alembic is the migration framework that Mike Bayer created. Mike Bayer is the author of SQL Alchemy. So he created both SQL Alchemy and the migration framework, Alembic. So I will go with that if you need a recommendation.
Were you able to execute that from the shell there only because you had the Flask script package, or would you be able to do that otherwise, the database?
So if you remember, so DB is a global variable. It's declared in the app package as a global variable, okay? Right there. So then all I need to do here is I say from app import DB, and that brings that variable into my context. Okay? Are we good with databases? Okay, very important topic. So, very important that you protect your user information, right? So, users will provide a password. In this application, that was done in the command line, as you've seen when you installed the application, but other times it will be given, as part of a web form. Either way, you cannot store that password as is, because that's dangerous. If an attacker gets hold of your database, then they'll know the passwords of all your users. And users use the same passwords on their silly apps like this and their banks. So it's not a good idea to write passwords. So the best way to not give out your password or your user's passwords is to not know it. And the way you do that is you transform the password into something else, and then you write that something else in the database. The transformation function that you use to make that something else, it's not reversible, or at least there's no known easy to use reversible function, right? I mean, things change, of course, but at least you should make an effort to make sure that it's a function that's difficult to reverse. So that if an attacker gets hold of your database, all it finds is hashes, and they're no good for anything else. There's no way to determine the password from them. So the way I'd like to do this is to add in my user model function that creates a hash and a function that checks that a password is valid with the hash. So I added two methods to my, actually three methods to my user model. I made a method that I wrote as a property that's called password, so that I can, so by making it a property, I make it so that I can say user.password equals, so it looks like it's a member variable, not a function, not a method. Because it looks nice that way. So I made it a property. This property is write only, so I can only write a password to it, but if I read it, there's no password. The password has been discarded. So the getter of the property returns an attribute error. Okay, I ensure that if anybody wants to get the password, there's an error. That's not available. The setter will run the hashing function, this function that transforms the password. And then it will store the result in the password hash, attribute. This is one of the columns I put in my database. Okay. The transformation function that I'm using for this application comes from Werkzeug, Werkzeug is one of the dependencies of Flask. It's written by the same guy, and it provides all the web server-ish type functions and a collection of utilities. And one of the modules is about hashing passwords, and that's what I'm using. It uses a currently pretty standard algorithm for hashing that's called PBKDF2, password-based key derivation function 2, if I remember correctly. That runs not one transformation, but it runs a loop and transforms the password many, many times, I believe 1,000 times. So it's a slow function. You should not abuse this because it's, it takes a toll on your CPU. And then the result is written to the database. The bottom method is the one that verifies the password. So that takes a plain text password. This is the password that you need to verify if it's correct. And then the way the verification works is you call this other function also from Werkzeug, and Werkzeug will go and apply the transformation function to this password, and then it compare the hashes. And if the hashes are equal, then the password is good. So we're going to call this when when the user logs in.
So that CPU expensive thing has to be done each time someone logs in.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So now we're beginning on the authentication part, and we're going to start by making a new blueprint. So this is the authentication. It's it's a self-contained set of features. It's likely that you will move this to your next project. So it's nice to have it separate. So I put it in a different blueprint. So I call this blueprint Auth. So I made a package, a sub-package app/auth, and then the constructor of that package creates the blueprint, and then I have, for now, I have a placeholder route that does nothing. We're going to improve this later. And then in my application factory, I need to add a second blueprint registration for this. And again, I'm putting it in the import. I put it inside the function because that's the only place I need it. If you note at the end, there's a URL prefix. When you register a blueprint, one option that you have is to give it a prefix. So then all the routes that are defined in that blueprint will have that prefix. So I have so my only route so far is /login. When I register that route with /auth as a prefix, then that will make the URL for that route will be /auth/login. And hopefully that should be already working here. There you go. Yes?
Why does the registered for the talks blueprint, it doesn't have a URL prefix? What's different?
So yes, the URL prefix is optional. So you can use it if you want to have a namespace for your blueprint. So auth, so I'm going to have login, logout, all those, they're all authentication related. So the URLs look nicer having a URL prefix.
But they're at the same level as the talks directory, as the talks folder.
Yes, so this is just a URL. It has nothing to do with the folder structure.
Oh, I see. So the talks blueprint doesn't
Correct.
have a prefix in the URL. Okay.
Right. So yeah, the main blueprint, it was just a slash. I don't need that. Another thing that URL prefix is useful for, many times you have, as I mentioned before, collisions. So you may have an index route defined in two blueprints. So this is the way you can make them unique by putting a prefix. Other times you may have the same blueprint instantiated more than once. It's unusual, but you can register the same blueprint twice with different URL prefixes, and then they'll be different. Okay. No questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you get a runtime error if you have collisions on URLs, or is that something you have to kind of accidentally find out?
You know, I don't know. I believe Flask will throw an exception when it finds the duplicate, the second one. So you will get an error on start. But I'm not sure. I have to check.
Actually, I've had it just pick one of them. I don't remember which one it was. Whether it was the first one or the last one to show up.
Okay.
It's an override. Okay.
That's not good. We'll have to fix that. Yes.
The completed application that you built, how many lines of code, just to give us a feeling for the size of a typical?
Ooh, that's a good question. I didn't count them.
No problem.
We can count them. We can run a script and count them. You can if you want, you can go to GitHub and browse the code. I mean, if you want to get sort of an eyeball it. Okay, so we get to the first interesting part. So remember when I gave you the instructions, you had to run this command on the command line, add user, right? So that's this. So if you thought it was something very complicated, well, it's not. It's really simple. Recall that we're using Flask script for our main start script. And Flask script comes with 2 commands, but it allows you to define your own additional commands. And the way you do it is with a decorator. One more time. So you can say, you can decorate any function with manager.command, and that will make it a command. So now it's available on your command line. And the way it does it is through introspection. So it will get the name of your function, and that will be the command. And then it will look at the arguments, and any arguments that have no defaults will be positional arguments in your command. And any arguments that have a Boolean default will be flags that you enter with --. So it's very, very simple.
This is part of Flask script.
Flask script, an extension for Flask, yes. And one more, the help message, the doc string, that it will show that as a help message when you do --. help. So it's very, very nice. So for this, I get the password twice, and for that I'm using a module from the standard library, getPass. So this is a prompt on the console that doesn't show the characters that you type. Very simple thing. So I get it twice. I make sure they're the same. If they're not, I exit. And then I call create all. So I decided to simplify your installation instructions. I didn't tell you to create the database. I'm just calling it from here. And create all does nothing if the database is already created. So it does not destroy your data. So it's safe to call, you know, if you have a database with data. And then what do? I make a user. I pass all the, you know, the email and the username and the administration flag in the constructor. They're all defaults. And then I add it to my session. That this is a SQL Alchemy thing. When you need to make changes to your database, you work with a database session. That will be you can think of it as a database handle. So I add it to the session, and then I commit the session. Commit is the call that makes the changes effective. And if you have multiple changes in your session, and then you commit them, the commit is atomic. So it either works or doesn't work. But if there's an error in the middle, then nothing will get in the database. So you're guaranteed that your database is always going to be consistent.
So is this like a MySQL transaction?
Yes,
for everyone? Okay.
correct. a session and a transaction are kind of the same thing. There's a little bit more logic in the session. So what SQL Alchemy calls a session can be isn't always a transaction, but the commit basically commits everything as a single transaction. And this is how your ad user looks in the command line if you say --help. Look how nice, and we didn't have to mess with argparse or nothing of that sort. It's really, really nice. Okay. So web forms. This is the next step in getting to a user login and registration system. So for web forms, you can use Flask alone, but Flask alone does not validate your forms, so it's kind of inconvenient. There's an extension called Flask WTF, and that does not mean what you think it means. It means something else. This is an extension that wraps another project called WT Forms that is very good for validating forms. And that's what I decided to use for this project. And it's probably a good choice for any project that needs forms versus looking at the form values directly from Flask. Gets installed as usual. Flask WTF does not have initialization, so we don't need to go to our application package and initialize it. There's nothing to do. It's ready to go if it's installed in the virtual environment. And the bottom snippet, that's pseudocode. That shows how you work with a form. You will create a form that represents all the data elements in the web form. I'm going to show you how to do that in the next slide. So in your route, you create an instance of that form object, and then you call validate on submit. This is a method that returns true if the form was submitted and all the things that were submitted were valid, or false otherwise. If you get false, that means that you need to display the form, basically that the user hasn't submitted anything yet, it's only opening the page. Or it means that one of the items was invalid, it failed validation, so you need to show the form again so that the user corrects the mistake. So it's basically that simple. You have two options. Note in the route, I had to add a methods argument. By default, Flask will listen on GET requests only, but forms are submitted with a POST request. So I need to tell Flask that this route needs to be invoked for GET and POST. Okay? So the top snippet shows a form class. So this is going to be our login form. So we have the email. We're going to log in users by email, not by username, because users tend to forget their usernames, but rarely they forget their emails. So I decided to ask for email and password. So email, password, a checkbox for a remember me option, and the submit button. That's all there is, very simple. So WT Forms defines classes for all the fields, all the types of fields that you can have in a form. So there's a string field, a password field, a Boolean field for the checkbox, and a submit field for the submit button. The first argument you pass to any of these is the label that you want the form to show. Because, well, I forgot to mention this. Not only it validates forms for you, but it renders the forms for you as well. So you will get the form rendered for you with this. So the first item is the label, and then you can have an optional list of validators, and the validators are little classes that that do, each validator does one thing, and you can put a few, a list of them. So for example, for my email, I have required, double fail if I submit empty, and then I have length between 1 and 64, so double fail if it's more than 64 characters long, because that's the size I have in my database. So if they go longer than that, then I have a problem. So this will not let it. And then I have email. Email is a validator that makes sure that the style, what you type looks like an email address. It will not go verify that it is valid, but at least it's something at something dot something else. It will verify that the syntax is correct. And then at the bottom, that was a placeholder on the previous version. So now we have an incomplete version of this that renders the form. My render template, I'm calling the login.html template, and I'm passing the form because the magic would happen in the template. So when I render the template, I need to give it the form object. Okay?
So if you wanted to customize, for example, something like the submit button to change the color or shape or whatever, where would that code actually reside?
It does not go there. So you have a couple options. If you want to have a custom form, you leave it like this, and then when you render, you render your fields manually, and then you can write the markup yourself. So that's one way. I'm going to show in actually the next slide that we're going to be using Flask Bootstrap for rendering the form. And they provide, actually, they provide some options to change the style of buttons, but it's not, there's not a lot of options. Many times, this is very easy. You just say, quick form, and that renders the form for you. If you can get away with that, it's great because it's easy. If this is not enough, you can render the fields one by one, and then the field that you need to customize, you render it yourself with your own HTML. No, so the question is how to do custom buttons. As far as Flask WTF goes, it's a button. So it's a button. You define it as a button, a submit button, and that's fine, like I did in the previous slide. If you need to render it with a custom style, instead of using these mega commands that do a lot, then you have to write your own HTML in your template. Does that make sense? And the way I will do it, if I had to do that, I will render, this way, and then I will go look at the code that was generated in the page, and then I'll replace, and I'll take that as a base and then modify it to my liking. That will be how I do it. I'm not an expert in HTML, so. Okay. Question? No. So this is another thing that Flask Bootstrap does. It renders forms using using Bootstrap styles. So Bootstrap has a bunch of configuration options for rendering forms, and you have to learn them because if you say WTF quick form, you get it for free, and by default it looks like this. Okay. So there are things that could be improved. If I didn't want the fields to extend, from left to right, I could put a div with a width that's half the screen, for example, and then do the quick form inside, and then it will scale to make it look a little bit better. But I decided not to complicate things. So that's it. Who can guess what's going to happen when I click? Yeah, for free. It's all done. Okay? I'm not doing it. It's, but just by having the validator set up in your form, it's done for you. And so look, this is the required validator that I put. Now let's say I type something here that is not an email. Now, it's a different validator now providing an error message. So it's appropriate to the error. The messages are configurable, by the way. I'm using default messages, but each validator takes an error message as an argument. So if you want to do it in another language or whatever you want, you can configure the errors. Okay. I don't know how are we with the break. Is it time for a break? It is? Wow. Okay. Sorry, break. Hey, Ruben?
Yep.
Nice to meet you. Okay, should we continue? Okay, logging in. So to log in, I decided to use this other extension called Flask-Login. This is another very simple, focused extension that all it does is maintain the data in the user session that basically keeps the logged in state of users. That's all it does. So Flask-Login does not care how our users are represented, or if they're in a database or in memory, or it's not its concern. So all this extension do is just when you log in, it writes to the user session the user ID, and then it remembers it. That's it. So it's initialized as usual for this extension. It's login manager is the main class, and one additional configuration I gave it is the blueprint and route that show the login page. And the extension needs to know this, because if in my browser, I type a URL that's protected, that's only for logged in users, and I try to access it, Flask-Login will intercept that request and send the user to the login. And it needs to know where that login page is for that reason. Okay? So how does this work? Flask-Login does not enforce any requirements on user objects. We can make them be whatever they want. So the users that we have for SQL Alchemy are just fine. All it needs is 4 methods implemented in the user object. So it needs to have those 4 implemented. It provides a mixin class that implements these for the most typical usages. The class is called user mixin. So if you inherit from user mixin, then you get default implementations for those 4. It's authenticated, it's active, it's anonymous, and get ID. And that's what I did. I just in my user class, I added user mixin to the parent class list, and that gives me those 4 methods implemented by with default implementations, which happen to be okay for Flask SQL Alchemy objects. Typically, those work just fine. Since Flask-Login does not know anything about our objects, you need to give it a user loader callback, so that when it needs to load the user, we provide the function that does that work. And that's at the bottom with Decorator. You decorate the function that loads the user with the user loader decorator, and then Flask-Login knows how to load users. The function takes the user ID as an argument, and that comes as a Unicode string, so it needs to be converted to an integer for Flask SQL Alchemy, because in SQL Alchemy the keys are integers. But basically that's all the configuration. So we're going to go in steps. So we're going to write the login. So this is the function that was a placeholder initially. Then we added the render template at the bottom. Now we're adding, more flesh to it. So I'm going to explain this in, I think, four steps. So, well, before I create everything, so if the form doesn't validate, we still go at the bottom and we render the form. That's it. And that will show errors or the form if it's the initial request. So that's all done, right? So now we are handling the validation with successful case. So we've got a username and a password that are valid as far as Flask WTF concerns. So what do we do with that? We start by loading the user. And for that, we need to use a database query. So we need to load the user by email because that's what we have. So user.query is the query object from SQL Alchemy. So anytime you have a model in SQL Alchemy, or I should say Flask SQL Alchemy, this is not SQL Alchemy native. In Flask SQL Alchemy, you can say model.query, and that's a query object that you can use for running queries. So I'm going to say to the query, filter my my models by email. So I want users to have the email equals to form.email, which is the field of my form.data, and that's what the user typed. And then that returns a collection. It could be it's a query, so it can have multiple results. In this case, we know that it's going to be either 0 or 1, only because we said that the emails have to be unique. But the query is generic; it doesn't know that. So since I know that I'm going to get only 1, I say give me the first, and that's basically how I run the query, and I get my user. And if there's no user, I'm going to get none. Okay. So if the user is none, it's an error, right? It's an invalid email. So I'm gonna show an error with Flash. Flash I haven't talked about yet. I'm gonna show how that works in after we're done looking at this function, and then I'm gonna redirect back to the login page so that the user can try again. The second condition, so if user is none or if the user is not none, but then I go and call the verify password function, the method that we built a couple versions ago, and I send the password data from the form. And if that returns false, that means that the password is invalid. The user is okay, the email is okay, but the password is invalid. So either case, it's an error. So I show, of course, I don't want to tell the potential attacker which one is wrong. So I say invalid email or password. I don't want to give more information than I need to, right? And if I say invalid password, then this is a valid user. And that's not something that you should be telling everyone about, right? You should protect the user's information. So anyway, Flash is what makes a temporary error message visible to the user, and I'm going to explain how that works. And then I redirect back to myself, the same route, right? Which in this case, I don't have to put the blueprint name. I could say auth.login if I wanted to, but since it's all local to the blueprint, I can say .login, and that works the same. Okay, now let's say that both were valid. So I have an email and I have a password. So then what do? I call this function from Flask-Login called login user. Login user takes the user object and then a boolean for the if you want to remember me functionality, which I get from the form as well. That will be a true or a false because it's a checkbox. And that will write the user session. And we don't care what goes in the user session because we never need to look at that. Flask-Login looks at that. So that's all we need to do. We call login user. So now the user's logged in, and all we need to do is redirect somewhere. And that somewhere, in this case, I chose to be the home page. So talks, the main blueprint, talks.index. Okay? But there's a twist. As I said before, if you in the browser, if you type a URL of a protected route directly, and you're not logged in, then Flask-Login will not let you in. It will send you to the login page instead. So a nice feature of Flask-Login is that it remembers what was your original page you wanted to visit. And so after you're logged in, if there was an original page you wanted to visit, it would be better to redirect to that page so that you don't have to then type the URL again. And the way you obtain that page, the page that the user wanted to see, is from the request object. This is one of the context globals that I mentioned at the very beginning of the talk. So you can say request.args get next. And next is a query string in the URL, so that's how it looks in the browser. And that will be a URL if there's a page that the user wanted to visit, or it would be none if the user is just logging in, but it doesn't have any destination already set. So if I have a next, I go to that page, else I go to the home page. Does that make sense? Remember that flash call that I've made to show the error? Okay, that's not magic. Flash, all it does is register the message, but we still need to show it in the template, right? And that Flask doesn't know how we run our templates, if you use Bootstrap or what. So we have to write the code that renders those messages. And for that in the template, and in this case I'm doing it in the base template so that all my pages get flashing functionality, I just do a loop. This is a Jinja 2 feature that I haven't shown yet. You can iterate over a collection of items, and the collection of items are flashed messages, which I get from a Flask function called getFlashedMessages. There could be more than one. If I call flash multiple times, they accumulate, and I can show all of them. So for each flash message, I use the, and again, I copy pasted this from the Bootstrap documentation. This is how you show alerts. And if you want to see how that looks, so I can make this look like an email, but make it invalid. And that's the alert style. So that's how it looks. Now, if I refresh the page, it goes away. So these messages are temporary. When you call flash, they get stored. Flask remembers them. As soon as you show them, they're removed from the queue. So the next time they will not be shown. It's only once. Okay? That's why they're flashed. Now, so let's say now a user logged in. So now there's a new context global that you can use. It's called current user. That's defined by Flask-Login. And that is the user model of the user that's logged in. Okay, so if you have a web server with multiple threads, current user will be a different user on each thread. And if the user is not logged in, if one of the threads is serving an anonymous user, current user will be a special object that's called anonymous user. That's Flask-Login defines that. Now having access to current user enables me to improve my templates. So now I can put my navigation bar, I can put meaningful links. So my profile link. So I guess I should log in here. So my profile now can be, my username. So unfortunately, it was Miguel before. It's Miguel now. But if I was, so let's bring some other. So that's the other nice addition that I've added a login link on the navigation bar. That was the second one. So I'm going to log in this guy as the admin. Okay, so this is the admin. So now if I go to profile shows admin. Okay, so now that is done. by putting current user dot username in the as an argument to the profile link, the URL for. Okay. And then at the bottom you see the presenter login link that I added on the far right. And note that that is a conditional. So that's another Ginger 2 feature. If current user is authenticated, that's the top one, I show the profile link. But I'm not going to show it if let's bring my third browser. So this is going to be, so there's no profile here because on this browser I'm anonymous. Okay. And then at the bottom, only show the presenter login when the user is not authenticated. And then, well, here I'm showing the templates, the new templates. So now in the index template, I'm showing the username of the current user. It used to be hello world. Now I'm showing, the username. And for the user profile link, the user route, I'm loading the user from the database, and then I'm sending that user to the template. Note that if I go to, say, this guy, if I click profile, I go to my profile page, but I can say admin, and I can watch, I can see the profile of any user. And that's why this guy needs to load the user from the database. Current user is not what we want in the user profile page. Is that clear? We want to show the profile of a user, and the user comes as an argument. This profile link I have up here is a shortcut to show your own profile, but you can see others. Okay. Any questions about this? Yes.
Current user, you mentioned there were some global objects that Flask usually has.
Mm-hmm.
Is current user one that Flask usually has, and the login module is setting it, or is it
No.
because you're using Flask-Login?
Current user is added by Flask-Login. It does not exist if you don't have that extension installed. Yes, but it works in the same way. It uses the same implementation.
How do you mark routes as needing a login?
That's coming. Yes.
There's dot on the models, is that correct?
Dot on the models. Yes, that's correct. So you are in a blueprint. So you are one below where the models are. Models are defined in the app package level. Now we are one below. So if you want to import models into your script down here, you have to say dot to go one up.
Okay.
The relative. Yes, that's correct.
You're using a first or 404. What is
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed. Yes, I should have talked about that. So Flask SQL Alchemy has an addition to queries. So I showed before that you can say first, and that will return the first user or none if there's none. So another option that's only in Flask SQL Alchemy, it's not from SQL Alchemy native, is to say first or 404. So if there is one, you'll get it. If there isn't one, or so say the username is invalid, then you get a 404 error. It's a convenience function that, so let's say I put, I don't know, Miguel 1. So 404. Okay?
Does that use the built-in abort?
I'm sorry.
Does that use the built-in abort? Is it basically
That calls abort, yes. So abort is a function in Flask that basically triggers an exception. In the end, it goes all the way up, and then Flask sends the error code to the client. So you don't have to worry about it, yes. So maybe I should say this. The reason I like to put first or 404 instead of saying first and then saying if user is none, error or something, this is more readable, right? I mean, as much as you can, you should try to make your routes, that they don't need comments to understand what's going on. And if you can avoid checking for stuff at this level, all the better. Okay. So this is very simple. And to answer someone's question, I think it was you, so we're going to log out now. So to log out, you need to be logged in, right? There's no point in allowing someone to access the logout route if you're not logged in. And the way you say that a route needs to be only for logged in users is by adding a decorator. That's called login required, right there at the top, right below auth.route. So that route will not be accessible to someone that's not logged in. That person will be sent to the login form anyway. And then he may be sent back here. So this example is kind of, it's not really that useful if you're logging out, but there are other things that I'm going to show later where it's very important that the user is logged in. And this will prevent any strangers from looking at stuff they shouldn't be looking at. So logging out, I just put a /logout route. Since this is in the auth blueprint, which has a prefix, the route will be /auth/logout in the browser. But you don't care because the users are clicking a link; they don't have to type this. And then, as a nice improvement, remember the presenter login link that I added in the far right of the navigation bar. So now I'm going to make a flip between login and logout depending on the user state. So if the user is not authenticated, I show the presenter login as before. Else, I show the logout. Okay. Okay. So probably not going to spend a lot of time because I'm running behind. But so to show avatars, I decided to use Gravatar, which is a service, which I believe these days is owned by WordPress, if I remember correctly. But anyway, you have an email address, any email address. You make an MD5 hash of it, so MD5 it. And then if you go to http://gravatar.com/avatar/ that that returns the URL of the registered avatar, if there's one. So at the bottom you have an example where you specify the URL with the hash at the bottom, at the end, some optional arguments for size and that kind of thing, and you get an image. So I decided to put this in my user model, and this is something that I like to do, and a lot of people don't like. There's something called the fat model problem. Some people don't like to put a lot of things in the model. I don't mind, so I do it. So those people that don't like it will probably build a service layer, or put this in it's called the service layer. So it's a different function that takes the model and returns an avatar. Both styles work fine, no problem with either one. No one is better than the other. It's just personal preference. So in my case, I have a method in the user model, so I can say user.gravatar. I pass my size and other arguments as as arguments to the method, and it returns the URL. And note that I check if the request is secure. That's one thing that the request object from Flask tells me. So if I'm viewing this on secure HTTP, I return the secure version of the avatar so that all the because browsers don't like when there's a mix of secure and non-secure. So you have to comply with the the protocols. If you're viewing this through HTTPS, which you should if you are you're sending passwords. That's something I forgot to mention in the form. The password goes on plain text, so on a deployed system it should be on secure HTTP. So if you're doing this on secure HTTP, the avatar will be also secure. So this returns the URL, and then all I do in my template is I define an image element, and the source is what that method returns. And in this case, I selected 128 pixels. And that does that. And I'm not showing it here, but I also did another little thing at the far right. This was, before it was a logout link, and now I made it look like this. Because I saw many sites do this, and I said, why not, right? Okay. Any questions about avatars? Okay. This is the first. Actually, no. This is still pre-generic. So users can enter their own information. If you remember back from the beginning, in my user model, I had 3 fields that were for users to complete. There was the name, the location, and the bio. So I made a little form that they can use to enter these things. And so there's a profile form class that I believe I'm not showing because it doesn't show anything new. It's just a form with the 3 fields and the submit button. So it's done in the same way as the login form that we've seen. And then if the form validates, I move data from the form into my model, and then I write my model to the database. That's the if thing. And then at the bottom, that will be the case where the form is presented or it didn't validate. And in that case, I move data from the model into the form so that the fields in the form are initialized with the current values. Does that make sense? So initially, these are going to be empty. So if I go and I added a little button to go to that page, so that shows, that data. I can change it and okay. And I probably don't have, I don't think I have a slide for this, but I modified the template to show those elements in the profile page. And, as a nice addition, the location, I write it as a link to Google Maps. So if I click this, I can see my home. Hi, Portland. Okay. And note there's a flash. What's the flash here? Yes. So that flash message, your profile has been updated. It's also here. Okay. I'm hoping you find this simple. If not, let me know. Yes? Okay. So now we need to do another form to add talks. But before we do that, this requires a new model. So here's my talk model. It has all the fields I decided to show for a talk, a title, a description, the code to embed the slides, the code to embed the video, a venue name, a URL, a date, and something new, a relationship. So talks have authors, and I want to know who wrote each talk. And since I already have the users in a user table, I need to basically make an arrow between talks and users so that I know who authored each talk. And for that, I'm doing a relationship. This is a relational database, the core of the relational model, and that is how this is specified using SQL Alchemy, using the dv.relationship. And that line down there, what it does is it adds a high-level view into the relationship so that I don't have to run the queries by hand like you will do if you were using the database without an ORM like SQL Alchemy. So that will add a talks property to my user, so I can say user.talks, and that will give me the talks of that user. And then if you see the back ref argument, that means that the other side, so the talk, will get an author property. So on any talk, I can set talk.author, and that will be the user. It's very nice. You're probably wondering what's that lazy thing at the bottom, at the end. So lazy dynamic will make talks be a query, not a list. So by default, the relationship will be just the list of all the talks. But I find it useful to get a query that I can then redefine further. And for example, if you want the talks sorted by date or paginated, if you want just the first 10, if you get the list, then it's too late. You've got the list. So instead, by saying lazy dynamic, your talks property is really a query that's all set to run, but hasn't run yet, and then you can modify it before you run it. This is my form where I'm going to define my talks. It's not really that different. The only thing that's new, I have one thing, the venue URL, which is optional. So that it's okay to be empty, but if it's not empty, I want it to be between 1 and 128 characters long, and I also want it to be a URL. And I decided to show this because if you don't put the optional at the beginning, then you're going to be required to enter something, and that optional validator is special because it allows empty, and if it's empty, it will prevent the following validators from running. Does that make sense? If those two validators run, they will not accept an empty entry. So that's how you do optional with validation. Other than that, not much new here. This is a route, which is, I called it /new, and really not a lot of new things here. If the form doesn't validate, I just show the template, and that will render the form. I'm rendering the form with the quick form function that I've shown before. I don't need any custom styles on my form. And then if the form validates, I just create a talk. I pass all the things into it as arguments in the constructor. All those things came with the form. And then I add it to the session and commit it. And I flash a message. So nothing new. And before I go into the next one, so now, so now so this is the new form. Okay. So now we have talks, and now an anonymous user comes to the homepage, and we need to show a timeline of all the talks that we have in the database. So for that, we need queries. In the index page, what I'm doing now, before I was just invoking the template with no arguments, so I need to add the list of talks, and I need to send it down to the template so that the template can render them. So I run the query, so I say talk query order by date in descending order, and then I say all, give me all of them, okay? So that's SQL Alchemy syntax for running the query with the ORM. And then I pass that list down to the template as with an argument named talks. In the user profile page, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to show a timeline of talks, but only talks from that user, not all the talks like the one in the home page. So in that case, the query is it's a little bit more complicated. I first get the user, which that was there from before. Once I have the user, I say user.talks, and that is the relationship that I built in my model. So user.talks is a query that I haven't run yet, but when I run it, it will give me all the talks from that user. And before I run the query, I say order by again, and talk descending order. So it will show me the new talks first. And then I run the query by saying all. That runs the query and returns a list, a Python list. And now I have my list, and I can send it down to the template. Okay? So now we need to render these talks in the templates. So we have two templates, the home page and the user profile page, both need to render talks. So I'm not going to repeat myself and write the code that renders in both. So I'm going to use a feature of Ginger 2 that's called subtemplates. You can define chunks of template code that you include from other templates. So at the top, you can see index and user.html. All they say is include talks underscore talks.html. That's a subtemplate. The underscore is my personal naming convention for subtemplates. That's my choice. When I see a template that starts with an underscore, I know it's not a template to be rendered as a full page. I know it's a subtemplate. If you don't like that convention, it's not required. So talks.html is a subtemplate that renders a list of templates. A list of talks. That's the second snippet. So I'm going to render them as a UL element, an order list in HTML. I'm putting classes, class names, and that's the CSS that makes it look not like an ugly list, but more a nicer look. And I'm not going to show how I've done that, but you can look at that in GitHub. The CSS styles are all there. So inside the UL, there's a list element for each talk, and I know that later I'm going to need to render individual talks. So instead of embedding the talk here, I put another layer of subtemplate, and I include a talk header subtemplate, and that will render the title and the description of the talk. Okay, and that's the one at the bottom. So the talk header shows the title, the description, the user, which I make as a link, so that you can click and that takes you to the profile page of that user. If there's a venue URL, that's also shown as a link. So for example, if you do it on my website, when you click on the venue, it'll take you to the PyCon page. If there's no link, it shows the venue name alone as a no link, just as text. And that's it. And that looks like this. Yeah. There you go. So that at the bottom you can see the username and the venue name. Okay. The middle one doesn't have a venue URL, for example, so it shows as text. So what's missing here is the date, and I put that in a separate version because dates are a pain to work with because of all these time zones and stuff, right? So to render dates, I use an extension that I wrote. That's awesome. In my experience, there are other ways to deal with this. In my experience, the best way to deal with dates is to render them in the client. So the browser knows the time zone of the user. So the browser is the best equipped to render dates appropriately. So there's a JavaScript library called Moment.js that does an awesome job rendering dates in many styles. And I wrote an extension that's called Flask Moment that makes it a little bit nicer to use from Flask. So that extension gets installed and initialized in the usual way. And then since it's based on having some JavaScript in your page, in your base template, you need to include this thing called include moment. And that's a function that the extension provides that generates the script tags that incorporate the JavaScript code into your page. And you don't have to host the code, the JavaScript files. These are imported from a CDN. If you want to host them yourself, you can. So don't use this and just write the script tags that include them from your own static file folder. That's fine too. And then, so once all of that is initialized, you say inside a placeholder block in Jinja 2, you can say moment, and then pass a date. That should be in UTC. By the way, the server should normally deals with UTC dates, so always write dates in UTC. You can use any uniform time zone you want, but any is good. So why not UTC, which is the standard default UTC, default time zone. And then I pass local equals true. That will local true will prevent time zone conversion. For this date, this is a special case. I want this date to not be converted to local time. So I did this talk on April 10. If I'm looking at this, west of England, it will show as April 9 if it's converted to local time. So I do not want that for this specific date. I want to show April 10 in anywhere in the world. It's an exception. Normally you don't do this, but for a date of a talk, you don't want conversion. So local true does that. And then I format that using, these are styles that Moment.js supports that you can see in the documentation. The L thing, you can do L for a very short one. LL shows a little bit more, LLL, and then 4 Ls, and it gets more verbose as you increase the number of Ls. And
What's the superscript?
oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Remember that blocks in Jinja 2 are like methods, so they you override your methods in derived templates. So sometimes the base template has some content in a block, and you want to preserve that. So you have to say super, and that includes whatever the base template had for that block, and then you add your own stuff. And in this case, this is the scripts block, which has all the Bootstrap GSS JavaScript files. So they definitely need to be there. If you miss the super, you will break your page. So next, we need to show a permalink for the page. This is a page that's dedicated for a talk, and this will be where comments are entered. So we have a /talk/ID. That's the URL that I decided to assign the route that will go to a talk. Note that I told Flask that my IDs are integers by saying int : so that will not match strings. So basically, it helps the router in Flask do a better job. So if I put /talk/ some string, that will be a 404. It will not send me garbage to my function. And then I get the talk, or 404, and I send it down to the template. No big deal. And then in my template, I have, this is a new template, talk.html, extends from the same base so that it gets the same look. And I define my page content block with, remember that I had my talk header in a subtemplate, so I can reuse it here, and I'm going to show the same snippet of code that I was showing in the timeline of talks. I'm going to show it at the top of this page, and then below that I'm going to show the body, where I show a video if there's a video. So these are optional, so I need to check. So if I have a video on the talk, I show it. If I have slides, I show the slides, and then that's it. Now the video and the slides are HTML code. So this is the code. For example, if it was a video, you will go to YouTube and say embed, and that will show some code, right? And that's the code that you're going to enter in the talk page when you define your talk. So that's HTML. The problem is that Jinja 2, for safety, escapes HTML by default. But in this case, we want to show the HTML as HTML so that the browser embeds what it needs to embed. So I need to say to Jinja 2 that these two are safe to not escape. And that you do with the filter called safe. Okay? Yes?
So when you pipe to safe, does it do anything to make sure that there's nothing evil in the embedded HTML? Or
No,
totally trust it?
you are responsible. So consider this application. You as the admin, you have to go to the command line and define what the users are. So you have to trust those users. In this application, the users are trusted. So they are allowed to enter HTML and supposedly you know them and you know that they're not going to do anything malicious. If this was an application that's open to anyone, I would never do this.
Is there any way you can maybe specify like a clean, like, there's like some known.
Yes, actually, I'm not sure if I'm running late. I may not have time, but you can use Bleach. Bleach is a Python package that cleans HTML. And basically, you give it a whitelist of tags that you want. So you can disable all the scripts or anything malicious. So yes, you can definitely do that. You could even write a, so that's a package, so you will have to do it in code. You can write a plugin for Jinja 2, another filter that you can call clean, and it'll look really nice. But it's not by default. And then the title in the timeline, I'm making it, so this was text, the titles are text. In this version, I make them links, and that's the link that takes me to the permalink page. Okay? Any questions about this? Okay, so this is a quick one. Speakers may want to edit the talks that they entered. So we have an add talk function already built in, but I decided it would be nice to have also a way to edit it. So if you want to edit the embedding code or the description or the title, you can go there. There's not much new here, but one thing that's interesting, if you edit a talk, I need to verify that you have permission to edit the talk. So you have permission to edit the talk if you are an admin or if you are the speaker of that talk. But if you are someone else that has other talks, of course you cannot go edit someone else's talks. If someone else tries to edit a talk that's not, that person's not the author of, then I abort with a 403 error. That's the permission denied or something like that. That's an HTTP error code. And abort throws an exception, so I don't need to say return abort. It just everything stops there. The other somewhat interesting thing, if you remember in the previous forms that I shown, I was moving data between form and model one by one field, each field in a different line. So this model has, or this form has a large number of fields. So this function will get pretty long if I had to copy, in the right there where you see the to model. I mean, if I had done it in the way I've done the other ones, it would be a long list of fields all getting copied from from the form to the model, and then at the bottom, that same list again from the model to the form. So I decided to wrap that into a couple of methods that I put in the form, and these are those two. I mean, if I wanted to get clever, I could do a loop, find a way to not have to do one by one. I tend to prefer this explicit because you see this and you understand what's going on. If I come up with a loop thing that gets the properties, it will be way more confusing and it will not be as easy to understand. So I prefer longer but explicit. But as always with Flask, it's your choice. You can do whatever you want. Okay, yes?
Is there an extension you like for managing user permissions and roles? I see you're explicitly checking for are you an admin?
That's you're asking me if I like. No, I prefer to do it myself. There's one extension. It's called Flask Principal. I think at least for the applications that I build, that's way too complicated. In my the applications that I build, it's easier to build my own. But yes, you have one option for that. Okay, so this is probably the last feature that I'm going to discuss in detail, and then I'm going to just give you an overview of what's left for you to review on your own, because it looks like I'm not going to have time. So this is the comments. So for the comments, I decided to do something Stack Overflow style. So when in Stack Overflow you can type Markdown and it gets rendered on the fly, so you get a preview. So that's what we're doing. There is lucky for me, the code that Stack Overflow uses is open source. The client side, the Markdown real-time renderer is open source. It's called Pagedown, and I wrote an extension for it called Flask Pagedown to make it accessible to Flask. So that's what we're going to use for the client. Before I go into the details, I'm going to mention that the HTML that's rendered in the client, so the user types Markdown that gets rendered, that HTML the server does not see. It will be insecure. Now we are in the case where there's an anonymous user typing something or who knows what, right? We don't know because it's the client. And then if I get in the server that HTML, I will have to go through a lot of effort to make sure it's clean and safe, and I don't want to do that. So the way I decided to handle this is to discard the HTML that gets rendered by the client. The server takes the Markdown source, and then in the server, I re-render it using server-side tools that I know and love, and then I trust. Okay? So that is how this is going to work. To initialize Flask Pagedown, it's all the same as before. This is, in particular, this is very similar to Flask Moment, and you can tell that I wrote both. At the bottom, you have to include the JavaScript for Pagedown, and that is done with include Pagedown. And once again, that comes from a CDN, so you don't have to host any files. If you want to host the files, then don't use that and include the JavaScripts on your own. And everything works the same. So start with the model. We need a model to store the comments. So this is largely similar. There's nothing new in this. Comments have two relationships. So one to users. So users have comments. So you should be able to query all the comments by a user. And talks have comments. You should be able to query all the comments in a talk from many users, even anonymous users. So those are two relationships. Another interesting thing, if you look at the fields, there's a body and a body HTML. Body is the Markdown source. And then, because I don't want to re-render Markdown every time someone goes to view a page, because it takes time to render and that doesn't change. I store the HTML the HTML generated code as well in my database as an optimization. Okay, server side. So I need to generate that body HTML, right? And I don't want to have to manually go each time the comment is created to go do it. So one nice way provided by SQL Alchemy to do this is to use events. So you can tell SQL Alchemy to call a function that you provide when an event occurs. In this case, when a field is changed. So if you look at the bottom line, I'm saying an event that when comment.body is set, I want this function to be called. And that's my function, and I created it as a static method in the comment model. It could be a standalone function too, but for context, I wanted to have it in the comment. And this function uses bleach, which I was mentioning before, to generate clean HTML that we trust. So how this works? The conversion is done in 3 steps. This event will get the value of the property that the event is attached to. So that's the Markdown source. And that will be value in that argument list. So I take value and I run it through Markdown. Markdown is a Python package that renders Markdown. So that's the first thing I do. Now I have HTML from the Markdown. Now to that I run bleach.clean. Bleach.clean takes a white list of tags and it removes any tags that are not in that list. And I have my list of tags is there. It's very safe. So only links and paragraphs and not much more. So anything that is not that will go away. It will be removed. If the user typed a script tag in the Markdown, that will be removed. Or JavaScript, right? Anything that is not one of these tags. Okay, so now I have a clean HTML. One thing that Markdown doesn't do, but Pagedown on the client does, is to linkify links. So if you type a link and don't make it a link, it shows it as a link, as a clickable link. Markdown, the syntax does not support that. So to make the server-generated HTML the same as the client, I added a call to bleach.linkify. Linkify will find any things that have the look of a URL and will make them clickable. It will just replace it with a element. Okay? So all of that is stored in target.body HTML. And it will happen automatically when I set body. So once this is done, I don't need to worry about it. Okay, so it's a good way to generate to handle generated properties in your database. Okay, we need to have forms for the comment. So here, this is a slightly more complex case. You can have a known user of the application writing a comment, and you can have anonymous users writing comments. If the user is known, all I need from that user is the comment, the Markdown. I don't need that user to tell me the name and the email. All those things are unnecessary. So for known users registered with the application, I have the first form, the presenter comment form. It only takes the Markdown and a submit button. But then, anonymous users will have to provide some information. We don't want anybody to write stuff and not be accountable for that. So we want them to provide their name and their email. And we also want to put, since we're nice, a notify option. So if you want to get an email when someone writes comments on that same talk, they can get an email. So that's a Boolean field. Okay, any questions about this? So because I have 2 forms, the route gets a little bit more complex, So this is the top part. The next slide shows the bottom. Instead of running one form, now I need to decide which form to show. So I do that by checking current user. If current user is authenticated, my form is going to be the presenter form. Else, it's going to be the regular user form. And then when I validate the form, if the form validates, I'm going to create the comment object in a different way. If the user's known, if it's a registered user, I can approve the comment immediately. I trust those guys, right? Those are people that I know. I gave them access. So when they enter a comment, the comment is published immediately. That's the approved equals true. For regular users, I don't trust them. So I'm going to not approve comments. Comments need to be approved on a one-by-one basis. This is what I do in my blog, by the way. I don't let anything through, unless I review it and make sure it's not spam. So I'm setting approved equals false for anonymous users. Okay. So now I created a comment which could be created in two different ways, but the second part of this function gets the comment regardless. So if comment is set, that means that I have to write that comment to the database. So I go ahead and write it, and I show a customized Flash message depending on whether the comment was approved or not. So for known users of the application, it will say your comment has been published, and for others, it will say wait until the comment gets reviewed and it'll be approved then. And then I end by redirecting back to the talk page, this same page. So that's the case where a comment is submitted. But this route, which is the talk route, also needs to show all the comments at the bottom. That's missing. So before I go render the template, I need to get my comments, the comment list to show. And for that, I need to run a query. And I use one of the relationships that I built, talk.comments. That will give me the query that gets me all the comments for that talk, only for that talk. And then I order them in ascending order by date, by the third timestamp. And I send them down to the template for rendering. Okay? Any questions about this? So for the templates, I do kind of a similar thing to what I did with showing the talks with the sub-templates. I'm going to define a sub-template that renders a comment list, and that's called _comments. So at the bottom of so I'm showing the talk header, then I'm showing the slides and the video, then I'm showing comments if there are comments. So if comments is not none, I show a header with the comments title and then the list of comments, which I'm going to show in the next slide. And then below the list of comments, I'm going to show my form so that you can enter a new comment. And that is, again, rendered as a quick form. So this is my comment list. It's, again, kind of similar to showing a list of talks. I have an order list, and then for each item in the comments list, I call another sub-template. One addition I have in this one is for each comment, I wanted to show the number, the comment number. So comment 1, 2, 3, and so on, so that you can see how many comments there are. And Jinja2 gives me the index of the loop in the loop.index. So I'm putting that in a variable using set. So when I call comment, the subtemplate, that template will have access to index as a regular template variable, and it can render it as part of the comment. And this is it. This is the one where I show the comment. I show the author. This looks long because I'm showing some of the Bootstrap markup, but all it's really doing is showing the user, which can be a known user, in which case I show it as a link to the profile page, or it can be an anonymous user, in which case I just show the name as text, the name that they entered in the form. So that's done in that if statement that takes most of the screen right now. If this is an anonymous user and the current user is the speaker of the talk, then I show the email address. Only in that case, I show the email address. So if you are the author of a talk, you can see the emails of all the people that commented on your talk. But, or if you're an admin, I believe, yes. If you're an admin, you can see them too. But other users or anonymous users will not see emails. Of course, you're not supposed to show people's emails publicly. The other interesting thing is how I show the date the comment was entered. I'm using moment once again, but here I'm using a very nice feature from Moment.js that's called From Now. That's basically that will say if the comment was entered yesterday, it will say it was yesterday. Basically, it will say in English how long ago the comment was entered. If it was recent, it will say a minute ago, 5 minutes ago. You know, and Moment.js, it's you can localize it, so you can show the same things in other languages. By the way, so that's really nice. And so maybe I should enter a comment. Oops. So now I'm showing one comment, and since I'm a known user, this has been published already. Okay, and you see the blue little square that shows number 1. That's the index right there. And my name is shown as a link, so I can go to my profile page. If I go to I believe this is the anonymous. So here, my comment is already published, so the anonymous person can see it. So some markdown, and your comment will be published after it's reviewed. Okay? So you're seeing it here because this version does not have moderation yet. For a moment I panicked, but I remember now that the next version is the one where the comments that are not approved will not be shown. Phew. Anyway, I need to go to the next version to show this. Okay. So now this should magically be, there we go. Okay, so now I have moderation in my app. So you see, the anonymous user does not see that comment. If I go to Chrome is where I am logged in. So if I refresh this, I can, so I see it down there, and I get the moderation controls, so that I know that this has not been approved. Another option for moderation that I'm going to discuss in the 10 minutes that I have left. You can moderate in place in your talk, as I've shown, but you can also go to a page where you see all the comments that are out there for moderation, okay? And so in this one, you can see comments for different talks that you own. Yes, you're smiling. Yes, I'm going to deny one comment. Okay, they're made up. I know I'm great. Anyway, that, and then the other browser, I had the admin. This guy gets, so the admin has one comment to moderate on his own talks, and there are 4 total in the system, and he can moderate all of them, right? Because that's an admin. He can do anything. And all 4 are shown here, okay? So let's see how far can I get with this. So I'm doing an API for this. The problem with this one, imagine you have 3 or 4 or 10 comments to moderate all in one page. If you do it the regular way, where you click and that loads a new page where you say this comment has been approved, it's kind of a pain, to go through, because you just want to say approve, not approve. It's more useful to stay within the same page. So I thought this was a good example for doing an API that the client can invoke without having to reload the page. So this is a tiny API that all it does is approve or delete a comment. When you don't like a comment, it gets deleted. So this is a summary of RESTful APIs that I don't have time to go through, which, by the way, I'm doing a talk specifically in APIs on Saturday afternoon. So if you're interested in APIs, I'm going to show some stuff there. So yeah, Saturday afternoon. But anyway, for this one, we're going to do an API blueprint. So APIs typically are self-contained. You want to put them separate in your own blueprint. So new blueprint. APIs are very difficult to get right the first time. So I like to version my APIs. So I call this one version 1. After this gets deployed and used, I may find that it's not that great and I need to improve it. If I need to improve it in a non-compatible way, something that will not be, that if I change will break existing users, what I do is I'm going to call that 2.0. And then for some period of time, I'm going to support both 1 and 2 at some point, and then I'm going to deprecate 1. But by that time, I'm probably going to be looking at doing a version 3, maybe. Okay, so blueprints are nice because you can have multiple APIs, each in its own blueprint, so all the versions can coexist and be running at the same time. So this one, I'm going to call it API 1.0. That's the name of the package, and that's where the blueprint will be stored. And I'm going to give it a prefix when I register it, and the prefix will be /API/1.0, 1.0. Okay, so this API has 2 endpoints, so there are 2 requests or routes. One is to approve and one is to delete. So using RESTful principles as a guide, I decided that the approve function will be a put request. So it's for RESTful APIs, the method that you use to send a request, it's very important. That tells you what operation you want to do. So I'm sort of modifying a comment by approving it. So I decided that will be a put request. And if I want to reject a comment, I'm going to be deleting it. So that will be a delete request. So I'm going to have 2 routes. That's all there is. I need to set the methods to put and delete on those 2. Okay, and that will be, I'm telling Flask that only those, that the top route will be only accepted if the request is of type put or method put. And same thing for delete on the second one. So what do I do here? So this is a route that takes the ID of the comment as an argument so that I know which comment this is about. I get the comment from the database using the query. So I do a get or 404. If the ID is invalid, that will return a 404 to the API client. So the AJAX that's running in the client will get an error. And if the comment is valid, now I have it. So if the comment is approved, I have nothing to do. This is a mistake. I mean, this API should not have been called on an approved comment. The comment should be not approved. So I return a custom error. So when I return an error, I like to write wrapper functions for them, because if you look at that code, you know what that's doing. If I say abort 403, you have to go look what 403 is, and so I can do this in a much more explicit way by saying bat request, and that's the function that I wrote that I'm going to show you in the next slide, and I can put an error message associated with it. But if the comment is not approved, I just set approved to true, and I just write it back to the database. That's it, and then I return success. Now,
How does it know that you're the admin?
it doesn't yet. So see the to-do line? Yes, that's missing. I'm going to show that. So yes, if you do it like this, anybody can approve anything. It's not good. Yep. So when you do an API, the client is probably more likely a browser. So the format of your responses, to be friendly with the browser, it's best to be JSON. So I'm returning JSON, which you can generate using JSONify. It's a helper function from Flask that takes a Python dictionary and renders it as a JSON string. I'm not showing the delete route, but it's exactly the same. Instead of adding to the or updating in the database, it deletes that comment. But other than that, it's exactly the same. So this is how I do error handling. I create a bunch of helper functions that return all the possible errors that the API needs to support. So if you call bat request, I generate a response through JSONify, same thing as the success response, but I set the status code to the 400, which is the correct status code for a bat request. And there's unauthorized, forbidden, not found. All the HTTP errors can be represented by helper functions. Now, remember that with Flask SQL Alchemy, we have that get or 404 or the first or 404. Those will throw an exception. So there's no way for me to stick my custom JSON responses. So what I do for that is I'm using the error handler decorator from Flask. And that basically tells Flask that I want to be called when one of those errors are thrown by anybody. So this error handler is done on the blueprint. So this will apply to anything that happens in the context of the blueprint. So any routes that are in the API blueprint only. So each blueprint can have different error handling. In fact, for all the other blueprints, you will want to respond with HTML, not with JSON. So it's good that they're separate. So for this one, I just get my own handler, and when I get called, I just respond with one of my wrappers, my error responses, not found for the 404. So authentication, right? We cannot let this thing go like this, because anybody can do anything. We want to make sure that only the users have permission approve or delete comments. So unfortunately, Flask, the RESTful principles say that you should not use user sessions in APIs, and there are good reasons for that. I'm going to talk about that on Saturday a little bit. So even though in this case it will be okay, it will make it a little bit easier, I decided not to use Flask-Login for the API, because APIs typically don't use user sessions. So the way authentication works in APIs is each request that the client sends needs to come with authentication. So there's no, it's bad practice to use user sessions to remember the user from one request to the next. So you ask the user to provide authentication every time. So we're gonna have the browser will send authentication every time I click on approve or delete, those red and blue buttons that you saw before. So how that works. One way would be to send username and password, but that's kind of tedious and it could be a security concern. So what I did is I'm going to create authentication tokens, and those are going to be the ones that will tell the server who the user is. So in my user model, I have two new methods to generate and to validate tokens. To generate the token, I'm using this package called It's Dangerous. It's written by Armin, the Flask author, and it's also used by Flask. So it's a Flask dependency. So that package generates an encrypted version of a Python dictionary that you can only decrypt if you know the secret key. Remember at the very beginning I showed secret key as one of the settings. So your secret key should be secret, and if it's secret, then you're the only one that can decode a token or encode. Okay, so get API token will produce a token for the user, right? You call this on a user. It will have an expiration of 5 minutes. So back when I did this talk 2 weeks ago for practice, I forgot and I talked and talked, and then I went to click on those approve and delete buttons, and they were expired. And as they are expired now, because more than 4 minutes passed, 5 minutes. So the expiration by default is 5 minutes. So they're not good after 5 minutes. And the second method is static, because this is what I use to identify the user. I tell the user class, I have this token, who's the user? So this method decodes the token, and inside that token, I have the user ID. So then I can load, at the bottom, I can load my user, and then it returns the user. And that's how I authenticate the user.
Wait, how do they get the, oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Right. I
Yes.
was gonna ask how they get the token in the first place, but you're about to show that, yeah.
So the obvious way to authenticate will be to go to my approve and my delete routes, and in both say, I have a token that I've got from the request, and then validate it right there. But I will be writing the same code twice. That's not good. So in Flask, you have this thing called before request. You can register a function to be called before any requests in the blueprint. So since this code is common to all my APIs, or all the functions in my API, I'm going to do it once in my before request handler for the blueprint. And this is the implementation. The JSON that I get, by the way, I said that we respond with JSON to the client. The client sends JSON to us as well, because it's easier for the client, right? So Flask puts the JSON decoded as a Python dictionary in request.json. So if there was no JSON, that's an error, bad request. If there's a JSON, I try to get the token out of that JSON. If there's no token, it's unauthorized. That person's trying to access the API without a token, so no. If I get a token, then I try to validate it with the method that I showed before, the static method in the user class, and that returns the user, or none if the token is invalid or expired. So if I didn't get a user, I again respond with unauthorized. So if all the checks succeeded, so I have no problems. The user is now authenticated. So remember that G global that I mentioned at the very beginning? I'm going to write my current user that I just loaded in G as current user, g.current user. And G, now I can explain, because now you have the context. It's very useful when you have before or after request handlers, and you can use G to pass data between those and the function that runs the request. And that prevents having to send arguments that will make it a mess. So this is how you do it. So now, right there where I had that comment that said that I needed to verify that the user had permission, now I can check with g.currentUser, which should be set up from the before request. And I can make sure that the current user is the author of the talk or an admin. And if it's not, I return another one of my wrapper errors, forbidden. And that's forbidden. So there's unauthorized, which would be when you need to ask the client to provide authentication. And forbidden is when the client provided authentication, but it was not sufficient. So this is appropriate here. Okay?
Is it dangerous to have a way to just check whether it's expired? Can it tell the difference between expired and invalid?
No, that's a good question. No, they will not know that. That's a bug, actually. That should be improved. That's a very good point. Yes, because if I go now I'm doing it on purpose. It didn't work this way back then. If I say approve, yeah, that's a very good point. You found a bug in my application. Yeah, should be improved. So the response should have additional metadata in the JSON. I should be able to say the token is expired, or at least return a 401 instead of this. Yeah, yes, 401. Yes, I'm returning 403. I should return 401. Thank you. Very good point. So, well, anyway, before I go to the rest, so I'm going to refresh. Note that all the ago times are updating now that I refreshed. So 19 minutes ago, I wrote that comment at the bottom. Time flies. So now I can go and say, I'm going to approve this. I'm not going to approve this offensive guy. And I approve this, and I approve this. So now they're all approved. When I refresh, all these are gone. Now I have nothing to moderate. And if I now go to this is my anonymous user browser. Now these comments are published. And then if I go to the other talk, the other 2 or 3, there's one here. And that's probably it. This guy had one. Yeah, okay. And I showed that you can moderate comments from a dedicated moderation page, or you can also, when reviewing comments, if you're the author of your talk, then you see the comments published with the buttons. The reason the buttons show in both places, it's very simple. I have them in my subtemplate. So the subtemplate is smart, and if the comment is yet to be approved, and the current user is the user of the talk, then the buttons show up. I'm not showing that here, but you can see it in GitHub. It's all done automatically. But I need queries to put all the comments to moderate in the moderation page, and that's what this does. I have a list of approved comments. So the top one gives me the comments that are to be published. Those are published. So now when I need to show comments to anonymous users, I get the list from here, not the generic list of comments. And then the other 2 are the comments that I need to moderate. And the middle one gives me all comments that are up for moderation, and that will be the query that I will use for admins. And the bottom one is in the user class, and that will give me the comments that are for moderation for one user. And that bottom one is tricky because I need to use a join. This is another database operation. Joins are very difficult to wrap your head around, but they allow you to, in this case, I'm getting all the comments in any talks for talks that are authored by one user. They allow you to combine data from multiple tables. And these are the routes, which really, I'm just using those queries to just get the list of comments. I have templates that know how to render a list of comments, so I don't need to redo any of those. I'm just using the same sub-templates that I had from before. And the only difference, if you see right above the include that renders the comment, I added one line that shows the talk that the comment belongs to. And that's because if you're viewing a list of comments from potentially multiple talks, you want to see from each talk, from what talk each one is. And that comes with a link, so you can go to the talk if you wanted to by clicking it. At the very bottom, you can see I include this is another template, a sub-template. That's the JavaScript code that makes the client-side work for this. That I'm not going to talk about here, but you're welcome to review it, and if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. So I think I need to stop. So what remains is pagination, which I'm going to let you review. There's no rocket science in this. And then I have emails. I thought this was going to be the one I wasn't going to have time to talk about, but I'm going to stop right here. So pagination is basically, so far I was showing, when I needed to show a list of talks or comments, I would just get the whole list and then send it down to the template. So that could be large sometimes. So basically you render a subset and then you put links to show the next set of comments or talks or the previous one. So you can see that in the code. And then for emails, I have two functions that I created. I put them in a new script. It's called emails.py. It's at the same in the application package, so at the same level as models.py. So it's for use for the entire application. And there are two functions that send emails. Send author notification. That one is invoked when someone enters a comment in one of your talks. So you're told that there's a comment to moderate only to the author. And then the other one is send comment notification. And that one finds all the people that commented on one talk, the talk that's getting a new comment. And from those, it finds all those that's checked, they notify me when they enter the comments. So it gets a list of emails, unique emails. So if someone entered multiple comments, you get only once. So it gets that list and then emails those people, okay? The way I implemented this is instead of sending the emails directly, I have an email queue, which I implemented with a database table. So when I need to send an email, I don't send the email directly. I just write the email to the database. So if I need to send, let's say I need to notify 3 people, I write 3 entries on my email queue, which is a database model and a table. And then I have a background thread that looks at that queue periodically, and it sends all the emails, and it flashes the queue. And the reason for that is that if someone enters an email and then there's a reply, and there's an interaction, maybe 4 or 5, that happened in a short period of time, you don't want to send 1 email per comment. So you accumulate, and then I have the background thread running every hour. So once an hour, it flashes all the emails, and then you start accumulating emails for the next hour. In the development version, if you're running the development version, the flash period is, I believe I set it to 1 minute because it's easier to test that way. But in production, it will be 1 hour. And that's configured. It's in the config.py. That's where you set the interval. So I said there was a package for unit tests, and the unit tests are all there. You can run them. To make it easier to run, I created a custom Flask script command that runs nose, which is a test runner. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So it runs nose and runs all the tests. In addition to running the tests, I like to run coverage on the tests. So basically, coverage keeps track of all the lines of code that were used or executed during the tests. So if you look at a coverage report, which I can show you right now on, let's see, talks, this guy. So that shows me for all my files, what percentage I exercised in my tests. And 62%, so it's not great. So there are some things that are very difficult to test. Things that are difficult to test are things that require the whole application running, so routes, for example. So if you look at my routes are not really that great in coverage because I'm not making an effort to test them. Things that are easy to test are things that are standalone that you can run without the application. So the database models are very easy to test. And if you look at models, what do I have? 98%, very high. The API is easy to test because Flask has a test client that makes it easy to send requests to APIs. So APIs, 100%. There you go. Errors, 80%. So I'm not exercising all the possible errors, but I am exercising both the approve and the delete. And that's why comments on the API has 100% coverage. So I recommend that you be familiar with the coverage of your tests. And the final one, it's very short. When you go to deploy this, there are a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. So first thing is that your application may fail, may throw an exception at runtime, when it's running in production. When that happens, Flask will send a 500 code to the client. So you will see internal error page, or the user will see an internal error page. It will not show a debugger like it will do when you are developing. The problem is that then nobody knows that the thing failed, right? The user doesn't know or care, and you are not notified. So that needs to be improved. So what I do is I set up an email handler that sends me an email whenever there's an error. And the body of the email contains the stack trace. And you can see in the code how this is done. It's using the SMTP handler from the Python library to send an error. And Flask knows how to send the stack trace. So that is all in Flask. Other times you want to log things that are not fatal, but you want to have a log of things. So for that, you can log to syslog if you're on a Unix machine, or you can log to a file or to the NT system monitor or event log. Either way, the logs that you log that way could be yours. You can log whatever messages you want that may help you detect problems. Some extensions also write logs. And this is how to set environment variables. The application reads environment variables from a config file that you put in your root folder. It's called .env. You can write any config variables here, And I have code that you can see in GitHub to read this and set the environment variables for you so that you don't have to worry about it when you deploy.
I have a comment regarding that you put this in the process environment. If you put things like the database connection string or the application secret in the environment, every user on the same machine can see these variables through the PS command?
No. Environments are per process.
Yes, per process, but I can use, as a user on the machine, I can use the PS
Oh,
command
if
to
you
show the environment
if
of other processes.
if you have access to the machine, yes.
That's a security risk, actually.
If you have a machine that is not only for you. So the passwords need to be somewhere. You have to secure the machine, make sure that only trusted people have access to it.
Put them in a configuration file that has the appropriate access permissions.
Okay. Yes. I didn't think of that. Yes. If you put it in the configuration file, though, you will have to commit the file to source control or modify it by hand. So you should not. You should definitely not commit those to source control. Maybe use a different config file. But yeah, that's a good point. We're done. So for the few of you that are still here, they want me, I forgot, and they're going to kill me for this. There's a at the bottom, they have a survey that they want you to answer. So if you want to see me next year or not see me next year, you have the power.